Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So I want to start today's episode by telling you something a little bit strange about me. But what I want to tell you is that I don't like snowplows. I don't like snowplows. That means there's snow on the roads. I don't like driving on snowy roads. Where I live, there are lots of hills. Sometimes they don't always take great care of the roads. So I don't like snowplows for that reason. If I'm driving on like the turnpike or a highway and I see them, one sitting off on the side of the road, I'm like, oof, I didn't realize snow was coming. And then for 21 years when I was ahead of school, it just always seemed to be a problem to get our parking lot plowed. And that was always stressful because I was worried about someone falling. Can we have school? So I just don't like snowplows. And that's a little weird, but now I want to tell you something else about me, and there's something that I like even less than snowplows, and that's snowplow parents. And snowplow parents, they're the ones who clear the path for the child. They want to remove every obstacle. They don't want their child to struggle. They don't want there to be an academic issue. They don't want there to be a social issue that they have to kind of navigate on their own. The parent wants to swoop in, and they want to make sure that their child's education is struggle-free, obstacle-free. And over the past several years, I've seen a shift among the parents. It used to be that we had a lot of helicopter parents. And helicopter parents, of course, they're hovering. That's where the name comes from. They're micromanaging. They're blowing up the teacher's email inbox. And helicopter parents, what I saw was that was really mostly negatively affecting the teacher because of the nuisance aspect of it. But with snowplow parents and them clearing the obstacles, it just seems to me that there's a much more direct impact that negatively affects the student. And so on today's episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss how to handle the concerning shift from helicopter parenting to snowplow parenting. But before we jump into that, we're talking about parents today, and I just want to ask you about the parents at your school. Do you have some parents who are anxious and stressed out and get upset kind of easily, and then they send you an email with capital letters or exclamation points? They come in and they want to have a meeting, and you're just already feeling a certain way in your stomach because of that meeting. And then those parents can be relentless. And listen, I think in most of our schools that most of our parents are great, but it's just that percentage that just seems to take up so much of our time and keep us from the things that we really should be working on. And that's why I created Parent Academy, because over the last 33 years, I've built successful relationships with thousands of parents, and I've taken that knowledge and I packaged it into an online course for you. And after I teach you in the first 4 modules of how to build better relationships and be less anxious and less stressed out about the parents at your school, then Parent Academy also contains 2 45-minute webinars that are teacher PDs that have a printable notebook and guided notes and discussion questions. And it's close to about 50 schools that have used the Parent Academy teacher PDs as part of a PD day or a faculty meeting. And so I'd love to get this into your hands, and you can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/parentacademy to learn more. I'd love to have you less stressed and less anxious about the parents at your school and I want to build those skills for you and with you. And so theprivateschoolleader.com/parent academy. And then I want to give you a free resource that can help you to have successful meetings with upset parents. And I think that every good coach has a game plan and every good teacher has a lesson plan. But I think too often private school leaders don't have a plan when they sit down to meet with an upset parent. So I've created an 11-page PDF that's called The 7 Steps to Having Successful Meetings with Upset Parents. This is free, just to say thank you for listening to the podcast. So you can go to theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting to grab your free copy of 7 Steps to Having Successful Meetings with Upset Parents. That's theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting. Okay, so the way that I've structured today's episode is that in part 1, I'm going to compare and contrast helicopter parents and snowplow parents. And then in part 2, I'm going to talk for a few minutes about why parents engage in snowplow parenting, because I think that it actually is going to help us deal with them in a much more successful way if we understand why they're acting that way. And then the final part, as you know, we try to be strategic and practical on this podcast. I'm going to give you 5 strategies to effectively partner with snowplow parents. So let's compare. A helicopter parent, in my mind, it's the idea of hovering and micromanaging. They're constantly watching, constantly checking. They're the ones that if they send an email and they don't get a response in an hour, then they're emailing again. They're constantly looking at their grade book. They're constantly critiquing and looking at, whether or not someone posted their grades by 4 p.m. And if it's 4:15 and they haven't been posted, they're emailing you. And they want to intervene. They want to micromanage. And it's a lot. It's a lot. And the way that it looks in our schools, sometimes I just jotted down a few things here. An email immediately after their kid gets home asking, well, why did they get this grade on this quiz or this test? Requests from the teacher for daily updates on how this social interaction is going. So if there's a conflict in the class or at recess or whatever, they want daily reports from the teacher. Sometimes these parents are overly involved with homework, and they're overly involved with managing the timeline of a project with all kinds of questions, for you that the kid should be asking. And they also, in my experience, helicopter parents, they just seem to always be concerned about fairness and about placement in classes or questioning teachers' decisions. And so I think that I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I think the thing about helicopter parents that I actually prefer is that even though they're anxious, they generally still allow their kid to encounter and deal with some obstacles. They just want to know and control kind of how those obstacles are handled. And so I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think I prefer helicopter parents to snowplow parents, because a snowplow parent takes helicopter parenting to the next level. And instead of just hovering and micromanaging, they actually are trying to remove the obstacles entirely. Hence the name snowplow. They're coming through and there's certain obstacles that are in the way for their child, whether they be academic or social or whatever. And they don't want their child to experience failure. They don't want their child to experience frustration. They don't want their child to experience discomfort. And so because they don't want their child to experience this stuff, they've got to remove those obstacles with their snowplow parenting philosophy and actions. And so what does that look like in our private schools? So when I was preparing for this episode, I jotted down a few things. One of them would be getting involved in peer conflict without letting the child try to attempt to resolve it on their own. So, there's stuff going on between two kids, and so now the triangulation starts with emailing the principal or emailing the teacher, and it kind of doesn't matter the age of their child. If there's conflict, the parent wants to get involved and they don't want their child to try to resolve it. Sometimes, snowplow parenting looks like pressuring a teacher to change a grade so that their kid doesn't feel bad that they got a low grade on a project or a test, and super pressure, lots of pressure on the grading system and the rubric, and just lots and lots of pushback and questions. I also think that snowplow parents look like asking you as the leader to like rearrange a schedule or change the day of a field trip because their kid has a dentist appointment that day, and they don't, asking for different teachers, or, that teacher has a reputation of being strict, which really usually means high expectations and consistent follow through, but we don't want that teacher. And then when it comes to consequences, like I said, a low grade before, but my goodness, if there's a detention, if there's a stay after school kind of thing, if you have to be off the basketball team for a week because of grades, then that's when the snowplow parent really kicks it into high gear. And then other stuff, just like, a parent demanding a deadline, emailing the teacher, CCing you as the principal, well, we were out of town, or he was sick, or just whatever, and they want like an extension. The child doesn't even ask for the extension. I'm talking like 4th grade and up. These are things that kids should be handling, and I'll get to that in a minute. But that's the difference between snowplow parents and helicopter parents. And if I had to summarize it in 1 or 2 sentences, helicopter parents manage problems, but snowplow parents eliminate problems. So that's kind of the key difference there. And so the thing is like, maybe this comes from a place of love, or misplaced love, or concern, or fear, or maybe even good intentions. But the problem is that this type of parenting, it has long-term consequences for their kid, right? And so we're going to talk about why parents engage in snowplow parenting, because if we want to deal with this effectively, part of it is, and I'm admitting that I've done this before, and maybe you've done this too. When it comes to a snowplow parent, immediately I kind of like roll my eyes, and I'm judging them as a parent and their parenting style, and why are they like this, so on and so forth. And that kind of keeps me from empathy. And empathy builds relationships, it changes behavior. And I honestly think that we can approach this and just be annoyed with the parent and continue to battle. And I'm not saying that if you approach it with empathy that it's magically going to get better, but I think that most problems in life, and certainly most problems in our school, are more likely to be solved if we have an empathic view. And so the way I hope to illuminate this for you is to give you 4 reasons why snowplow parents do what they do. So reason number 1, I think, is fear of failure in a high stakes world. Okay. Fear of failure in a high stakes world. So I think that a lot of parents, some parents, I should say, they believe that the world is a harsher, more unfriendly, more challenging, more competitive place than ever before. And whether that's true or not, it's what they feel and it's what they believe. And so whether it's college admission rates, or competitions like science fair or cheer squad, or you know that when it comes to sports, that it used to be that for the most part sports happened at school, okay? But now almost every sport has like a travel team and an AAU team and a club team and a this and a that. And so there's this race in youth sports. I mean, youth sports is kind of a perfect example of what I'm talking about as far as high stakes and fear of failure. A lot of I'm painting with a broad brush here, but some of the reasons why people are paying thousands of dollars for their kid to sit on the bench on a travel baseball team is because they think that somehow that's going to give them a leg up when they get older to be more, to have more skill and make the varsity team. I have a couple of clients, and I won't say what state this is in, but it's becoming a real issue in this state, which is redshirting kindergartners. And what that means is that they want to have their kids stay in preschool or not go to school until they're a full year older than the cohort, and then enroll them in kindergarten. And the main reason for that is so that they're more physically mature when they get into middle school and high school and they're competing in sports. And so this is a thing, okay? And so if that's out there in the world, then parents are stressed about it, and they think that if my child is failing now, quote unquote, they're going to fall behind forever. I want to hit you with that again. I really believe that this is one of the things that motivates the snowplow parenting behavior, is that they think that if my child is failing now, they're going to fall behind forever and they're never going to catch up. And so the reason this is so harmful, this specific one, is because failure isn't really the threat to the parent. They misplace that onto the teacher. The teacher is the one that is failing my child. And the school is failing my child. It's not, there's no taking of personal responsibility. That's a huge problem. And when we remove the opportunity that they can have, the opportunity to try, which also means an opportunity to maybe fail, then we're robbing our students of a chance to build resilience and to build more adaptability and to become an independent learner and to grow patience and perseverance. And so we're failing the kids when we let snowplow parents run us over. And if kids don't experience what I'm going to call manageable failure or a productive struggle now, they're not going to be able to handle it later when the stakes are actually high. That's the thing is that there's this misplacement of how high the stakes are. I think you and I can agree that middle school is a great place to make a bunch of mistakes. Figure it out, get more organized, muck it up, try things, figure out what you like, try your best in class. That was always my approach as head of middle school for the last 12 years of my career. We even said our middle school is a safe place to try things. That was kind of our motto. But if kids aren't, well, first of all, a snowplow parent wouldn't agree. They would say that it's high stakes in middle school. But if we don't let them experience a struggle now, when they get older, it's going to be way worse. Okay. So reason number one why I think this is happening, snowplow parent behavior is happening, is fear of failure in a high stakes world. And I will have all of this for you in the show notes at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 170. You can just listen. If there's stuff you want to go back to and jot stuff down, it'll be there for you in the show notes. Okay. Reason number two, parents see their child's struggle as a reflection of themselves as parents. Parents see the child's struggle as a reflection of the parent. I think this is a big one that doesn't really get the attention, and certainly the parent is blind to it. This is a huge blind spot for parents, because I think that some parents, they kind of like unconsciously tie their child's performance to their own identity as to whether or not they're a good parent or a smart person. So think about it. You've dealt with a parent before where they're freaking out over something. And in my experience, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but I'm saying that in my experience, it happens more often when I have a highly educated parent, master's degree, PhD, sometimes maybe a college professor, research scientist, etc. I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying there is a subset of highly educated parents who perceive that if a child gets a B on a test, that somehow that's a reflection on them as parents. Okay, so that's a big problem. I'm not saying we have the solution yet. I'm just trying to shine a light on maybe why some of this behavior is happening. And if their child is struggling, it feels like somehow they're failing as a parent, which is ridiculous, but feelings don't, there's a difference between facts and feelings. There's a difference between logic and the way that a parent feels about something. So, the thing that's most harmful about this one is that I really believe that the snowplow parent is teaching their child that struggle equals shame. And just think about that for a second. Like, we know all about the productive struggle, and I'm going to be talking for a minute about growth mindset in a few minutes. But if struggle equals shame in the mind of a child, and the parent is inadvertently like sending that message, that's a huge problem for them now and for the future. And so then another reason that this is harmful, as far as it being like feeling like it's a reflection on them as parents, is that then the parent wants to avoid challenges and hide mistakes, and the child then becomes very reliant on the child becomes very reliant on the parent to rescue them and come galloping in on their white horse to fix everything. And they're not developing their, self efficacy, or their ability to handle problems on their own. And so, a kid or two in your school, or you can think of a kid or two in your school from years gone by, where that kid wasn't too stressed about a consequence because he or she knew that mom or dad was going to saddle up and ride to try to protect them from that consequence. Okay, reason number 3 that I think that snowplow parenting happens is guilt. And I've seen this especially in really high achieving or really busy families. So guilt is reason number 3. And I'm saying from my experience, I've seen it more in really high achiever, high motivator, high motor, high expectation, busy families. Okay. And I've seen more snowplow parents coming from really, really busy professional parents, especially when both parents are working. Now, that isn't always the case, because sometimes when one partner or spouse isn't working, that is what frees them up to have all the time to complain and blow up your email inbox and your voicemail and all that other stuff. Okay. So it's not, none of these are like, absolutes. These are just what I have experienced as trends. Okay. So I think that sometimes they feel guilty about the amount of time that they're not spending with their child, or how available they are because of how busy their career is, or maybe there's pressure on the child because they figure that they want their child to have that same kind of a career, that same level of high performer. And I've seen it. And again, this is just my perspective on it, is I feel like when they ride in on that white horse to like clear an obstacle away, that they think that they're kind of like trying to make it up to their kid somehow, that they're not there all the time, or not there as much as they want to be. And so again, that one is kind of vague, I know, but I'm just saying that I've seen it, and maybe you've seen it too. And here's the thing, this is harmful because these kids, they don't need perfection. The messier the path is, the better, in my opinion. And anytime that there's guilt that's driving a behavior, I think the message that those parents are sending to their own children is that I don't trust you to handle this yourself. And if a parent continues to send that message to their kid, they're going to start to believe it. So I think that that's a huge problem with the guilt driver behind the behavior. And then number 4, the 4th reason why I think this behavior happens, snowplow parenting, is fear of emotional distress. And so understandably, parents are concerned about their children and anxiety and stress and mental health issues and depression, and they should be. It's a tough time to be a kid, especially a tween or adolescent or teen. But I think that some parents confuse discomfort with danger. So let me read that to you again. Parents are concerned. My kid's going to be anxious. My kid's going to have an anxiety disorder, my kid's going to have mental health problems, so on and so forth. Okay, I'm not minimizing that at all. It's real. But some of them confuse a kid being in a space of discomfort with somehow that being dangerous to their mental health. And that is most of the time not true. And so if for a kid, this is so harmful because if they don't learn how to regulate their emotions if all of the challenges are removed. Think about it. When a kid gets dysregulated, and let's set aside the learning differences and the neurodiversity for a second, okay? But if a child, for the most part, becomes emotionally dysregulated, it's probably because something happened that they didn't like, or that was stressful, or that was a surprise, or was out of the routine, or whatever. And children who experience those situations and then learn how to regulate their emotions, they're the ones who become teens and tweens and adults who are more mentally healthy and more resilient. So again, I'm not saying all of this is true all of the time, but this is just what I'm seeing. And so if a child just doesn't know what it's like to be uncomfortable, then how are they going to know how to solve a problem or how to get back on track after that problem? And I think that this actually increases the child's anxiety in the long term. Okay. So I don't know if you've seen this at your school, but I've seen that snowplow parents who are super concerned about anxiety and mental health, and the way that they act and the way that they intervene and the way that they get involved, that most of those kids have higher anxiety than the average kid in the cohort. That's just an observation. Maybe you're seeing the same thing, maybe you're not. But those are reasons why I think that it's happening and the way that it's harmful for kids. Okay, so then let's wrap up by giving you 5 strategies to effectively handle snowplow parents. Strategy number 1, lead with a growth mindset and call it the productive struggle. So, in your school, growth mindset and the language around growth mindset and the productive struggle, if this is part of your circulatory system as a school, if this is part of the messaging, if this is part of the signage and posters in every classroom, you can move a school where you have more snowplow parents to a school where you have less snowplow parents. I've seen it with my own eyes in 2 different schools, and it's one of the most important things that we can do for a family, because we're caring for the family, not just the child, is to get them to see the value of the productive struggle and to use language not only about productive struggle, but talk about, well, we're trying to build resilience and we're trying to build problem solving, or we're trying to build stamina and we want them to try a different strategy. And maybe saying something like, well, we celebrate mistakes, or, not knowing how and giving it a go anyways. That's what learning is, because it is. And so we need to normalize mistakes. We need to normalize the productive struggle in our schools. And the way to do that, if you want to know how to implement growth mindset in your school, you go listen to episode 4 of this podcast. It's called Turn Pedestal Kids into Gritty Kids by Implementing Growth Mindset. And I'll link it in the show notes, but you can go wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, and go back to episode 4. This is the most downloaded episode in the history of the podcast by far, which tells me something about what's going on at our schools. But in the show notes of episode 4, I give you all of the mini lessons that we used at our school, and lessons for middle school through high school, lessons for lower school kids. There's Google slideshows, there's Google Docs, everything that you need to plug and play. There's videos there. Plug and play to implement growth mindset at your school. Episode 4, listen to it, go to the show notes. It's all there for you if you want to really introduce it, or if you want to beef up the growth mindset at your school. Okay, strategy number 2 is to normalize student advocacy. You know, at our school, I would always say to our middle school kids, really, I would say this to the 4th through 8th graders, is I would say your stuff is your responsibility. And we really tried. We kind of ramped it up with the 4th graders, but once they hit 5th grade and especially 6th grade, we're like, listen, if you want an extension, you go to the teacher and ask for an extension. If you have a question about why you got this grade on the test, you stay behind class and talk to the teacher and ask that question. Kids have to become independent learners and they have to become advocates for themselves, because if they just run home and then the parent is emailing or calling about every little thing, we are doing our kids a huge disservice. And so in your school, you're like, well, okay, that's fine, but how do I actually do that? I think that we can have policies in our handbook and then literally teach kids and then do some role playing and some modeling for those kids, especially around that 4th, 5th grade age level, to show them what it looks like to go talk to a student, or for a student to go talk to a teacher, and then talk to them about how this is a skill and we're going to build this skill. This is a skill. I think it's a leadership skill, is to advocate for yourself and for kids to talk to teachers. And I say as young as 4th grade. That's just my opinion. And then what you're going to see is eventually parents are going to be, in my experience, are likely to step back a little more when the schools are teaching more independence, self-advocacy on the part of the student. I've seen that with my own eyes as well. And so, but kids don't just know how to do that. Sometimes we have to teach it as if it's math or social studies or language arts and teach it to them. And you're like, well, we don't have time to do that. Okay, well, do you have time to deal with the snowplow parents? I think you guys can figure that out. So strategy number 3 is to respond with empathy, but hold firm on policy. So we're going to respond with empathy. You can be kind, but and still be firm. You're good at that. What do I always say? Validate their feelings and acknowledge their concerns. Okay, you're good at that. The PDF guide that I was mentioning at the top of the episode, and I'll mention it again at the end, that has some of these steps in there about how to do that. What does that look like when a parent comes in, let's say a snowplow parent, and they're all fired up and they're saying this and that? How do you validate their feelings and acknowledge their concerns without agreeing with their concerns? You know, well, I hear your concern. That sounds really hard. However, we need to, believe that this is a productive struggle and it's going to be helpful for your child. Okay, so strategy number 4 is emphasize what the child can do. So, for example, Jacob can do this. Sadie can do this. Like you almost have to do like a belief transplant from your teacher to the parent, from you as an administrator to the parent. Jacob is getting stronger and more curious. Sadie is sticking with problems longer, and those kinds of things that are just showing that you believe in the child, that they can do this. And that if you're a broken record, you're not saying that they're doing it all the time. You're not praising the child, in ways that they don't deserve. You're talking about what's possible. And that's where we have to reorient the snowplow parent, is because they're trying to remove the obstacles, and in that they're diminishing their perception of what the child can do. And so as a school, I believe that that's our responsibility to be kind of a broken record about that. And then that brings us to our final strategy, number 5, and that's to play the long game. So this parent didn't get this anxious or fearful or stressed out in a week. You're not going to change that in one meeting. But if you're consistent with school policy, you're consistent with supporting your teachers, you're consistent with the kind of language, there's all kinds of real estate, whether it's the weekly parent memo or social media. There's all kinds of real estate where you can make growth mindset and growth mindset messaging part of the circulatory system of your school. And over time, and I'll say it again, repeating this message like it's a broken record. If over time, the long game, I believe that you can change that snowplow parenting and see it decrease in your school. So what are the big takeaways from today's episode? I just would say that snowplow parenting doesn't mean that parents are bad people. It means they're scared people, and we can view them with empathy and kind of help them see what their child is capable of. And the 5 strategies that I gave you to effectively handle snowplow parents. Strategy number 1, lead with growth mindset and talk about the productive struggle. And I'll just remind you that episode 4 of this podcast is where the gold is, as far as if you want to implement growth mindset at your school, or maybe you do have growth mindset as a part of your school, but it needs a little bit of a refresher. Episode 4 has all of those resources there for you. Strategy number 2, normalize student advocacy. Strategy 3, respond with empathy, but hold firm on policies. Number 4, emphasize what the child can do. And strategy number 5 is play the long game. And then your call to action is to listen to episode 4. Turn pedestal kids into gritty kids by implementing growth mindset. It's there for you. It's the most downloaded episode in the history of the podcast for a reason. Schools are eager to help kids in this way. And so that is a resource there for you. The podcast and the show notes have a lot of stuff there, like Google Slides and Google Docs and videos and lessons, plug and play lessons, all that good stuff. And then just another quick reminder, Parent Academy could move the needle for you so that you're less stressed and anxious, and also for all the teachers in your school as far as how they work with the parents at your school. Go to theprivateschoolleader.com/parentacademy. And then another last reminder, 7 steps to having successful meetings with upset parents, a free PDF guide for you. Just go to theprivateschoolleader.com/meeting. If you get value from the podcast, please share a link with another leader in your life or an aspiring leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I appreciate you and all the hard work that you're doing for those lucky kids and lucky teachers at your school. Thank you for taking some of that precious time to be here today. And I'll see you next time on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.